All right, we've talked about a few of the core modules in D3, those being scales, axes, and let's go ahead and take a look at those two in particular and see how they're able to transform the bar chart that we made and clean up the code a little bit, make things a little more uniform here. So we have our bars here, and we can go ahead and, we saw that we set the y using the bar height, and we set the width just by multiplying the data elements by 3. Right, well, that's not a very reusable strategy. So if we actually went ahead and what we can do here is we want to use a D3 scale to set their width. So what we can do is we can define the width of our chart, right? So we define the width of our chart to be something like 300. We want to map things between 0 and 300. So we can use D3 scale to map things between those ranges, right? So we'll create a new scale. We'll call this X, right? And it's going to be D3.scale linear. Of course, we talked a little bit about version 3, right? In version 3, that would be d3.scale.linear, right? The namespace collapsed here. But we can go ahead and create a linear scale, right? And the linear scale has a couple accessor functions, right? So we're going to go ahead and set the their x and y, right? So we'll go ahead and set the x. No, they'll give us x and y. Right, we're going to want to set the range, domain and range. So if we want to set the domain, right, that's going to be the values we're mapping from. So here, the domain, we can use another little D3 helper, right? We're going to look at the extent of the data, right? So D3.extent is just going to go ahead and create an array with the min and the max of the data, right? And we're going to want to give our x scale a range. So if we give it the range, we're going to want to go from 0 to the width of our chart here. So 0 to width. Right, now we've got an x scale, and we can go ahead and work with that x scale. So here we set the width as d times 3, right? In fact, we can just set the width with x of d, right? So x is going to be a scale, which is going to map things from 0 to 300, right? And the domain was the extent of the data, right? In fact, here we mapped from 4 to 42 for the extent of the data, right? So you can see our bar at 4 went away. So this is where in a bar chart, right, we actually want to start things at 0, right? So if we do this, we could take the max of the data, map from 0 to the max of the data, right? So now we're going to see our bar at 4 again. And we used x to set the d attribute here, and pretty simply, we can just use x here again, right? Keep our offset, and now we have, we're using D3 scale to set these all dynamically. So we could make our chart a little bit wider, right? And our x scale is going to map linearly for those new values for us. That's using the scale, and we could also use a ordinal scale in y if we wanted to. And the other part we want to touch on is using the axes function. So here we might not need axes, right? We could go ahead and add some labels on the left, and we have the data values right here. But if we wanted to add an axis, say we're making a scatter plot or a line chart, they're going to be really helpful to interpret the data. It's a lot of work to create an axes function. So this is actually one of the places where D3 helps us out a lot. So let's go ahead and add one. So the first thing that we need is our x scale, right? We're going to need that. And we're going to go ahead and use D3's axes creators, right? So I opened up D3.axis. I can show you guys this, show you all this API. So here you can see how this is done, right? You create instantiate the function, right? So here we can just use this directly, right? Well, generally I would call this, x-axis, right? So we know what we're working with here. Axis left, and we'll pass it our scale. Well, actually, we want the axis bottom. These are really just gonna, the bottom left are just gonna set where the ticks show up. So we're gonna go ahead and set the axis bottom, right? And then we wanna call that on our parent SVG element, right? So we'll go ahead and say, we'll take the SVG, right? We'll append a group element, right? And on that, we'll actually go ahead and call our x-axis function, right? So that's going to go ahead and actually grab our parent element and add that axis, right? So here you can see it actually added at the top, right? So on the group, we can set the transform attribute to move it around. I guess we could also set the x and the y, right? But transform is usually what you see. And so here we're going to want to transform it from, in x, we're going to transform it 0, right? And in y, we're going to want to transform it the height of our chart, right? So here that's going to be length of our data, right? So this would be data.length times bar height plus 2. Right, it's going to add that to the string, right? So transform, and let's go ahead and pass this as a function. So in here we go. Right, so it's going to return 0, comma, length of our data. I think we might need to put these in parentheses. That's what it's complaining about? Yeah, we're going to give it a translate. So that's what it's complaining about. So transform, translate. You can also rotate things, for example. So here we'll add our closing parentheses. So now that should set the transform on our group element, which will move our axes to the bottom, right? So there we go. We have our axes, which maps on our X scale, right? So, for example, if our scale went to, maybe we wanted our scale to go from 0 to, a little bit wider than our width of our chart we're putting in here, right? And maybe a little bit wider than our data, right? So we'll extend the scale a little bit. There we go. We have our scale, right? You can also see there's tick formatters, right? So here's a simple axis, right? And we can go ahead and have it add the text elements. Each of these each of these sub functions just shows it how to put it in, right? So here we go. That's our simple axis and how we use scales to do it.